Welcome to the Caregivers Like Us podcast, where we are answering the call and serving others. The purpose of this podcast is to provide support, encouragement, resources, and solutions to the caregiving community. My name is Vaughn Foy, also known as the Voice Brander, and I'm here with my wonderful co-host and friend, Miss Coach Christy. We are listening forward to sharing with you. Enjoy. Welcome, everybody, to the Caregivers Like Us podcast. My name is Vaughn Foy, also known as the Voice Brander, and here with my wonderful co-host, Coach Christy.
Hello, hello.
And as we get ready to start this episode, and I know I say this, but this episode is going to be really good. I've been sitting... Yeah, just waiting for this. It's going to be good. We have a special guest, Miss Ellen Patnaude, and she has, well, let me read her. I always start to talk about our guest, and then it's like, Vaughn, but you have the things written out there, and I don't know, sometimes I just kind of, I'm a jazz musician, so I improv. I was like, I know the song, but let me just play it my way this time. So this is kind of Ellen Patnaude is a Detroit native and graduated from Alma College. In 2016, Ellen and her family noticed memory and behavior changes in her mom, Charlotte. Her symptoms accelerated rapidly, leading to a diagnosis of Lewy Body Dementia in late 2018. We'll definitely talk about that. Charlotte's battle with LBD was short, and she passed away surrounded by her family in December of 2020. After her mother passed away, Ellen became interested in helping other people learn how to better navigate the unpredictable road. She became certified as a community educator with the Alzheimer's Association and is passionate about supportive caregivers and families on their journeys. Realizing her raw and honest way of talking about her experience might help others, she wrote, "You're not doing it right. Loving my mother through an unpredictable caregiving journey," and it was released in May of 2024. And as this podcast about the audiobook is coming out as well, which I'm excited about. Actually, it will be available as soon as this is released. Ellen is also a workplace communication coach, and she's supporting teams and leaders from companies around the world on ways to improve their everyday interactions. She is the author of I Thought You Knew, Confessions of a Chronic Assumer. I can't wait to listen to this book.
Chronic assumer.
I'm just super excited. Her title, everything is just, it's neat. I Thought You Knew, Confessions of a Chronic Assumer, published in 2022. Ellen lives with her family in Lapeer, Michigan, and is a founding member of the Rockstar Woman Community. She serves on the board of the Detroit Regional LGBT Chamber and is active in both the Flint and
Grand Blanc.
Genesee?
Yes, Genesee.
Genesee Chamber and the Grand Blanc Chamber. So I'm going to get on. Ellen's always educating. She's always educating. Well, we want to welcome you, Ellen. It's so good to have you here, and forgive my blotching up of the descriptions and things like that. But
no, it's my pleasure to be here. I just don't want anyone to think I graduated from college in 2016. The way that you read that sort of suggested that. It was a lot longer before 2016 that I graduated from college.
Well, that's all right. It's all good. My father always called me the career student because I was 4 years at my 2-year college and 6 years more at my 4-year college. It's all good.
All in good time.
Well, welcome aboard. And we read your intro and your book of You're Not Doing It Right, and the story and sharing about the journey with your mom. We're definitely going to want to talk about that because caregivers like us, as soon as we connected and you were sharing about your book, I was like, wow, our audience definitely will be encouraged because I'm sure there's tens of thousands of others that are going through similar and can use the, oh, I'm not alone reassurance and, and support. So Ellen, other than what I read in the intro, just we're going to just jump in right in and share with us a little bit about you, something that we don't know, and then tell us about your answering your call to the caregiving journey. That would be fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think something that wasn't mentioned here yet, but as soon as anybody, picks out even the free sample of the audiobook, they'll immediately know. I had a really difficult relationship with my mom. We had been adversaries. We also loved each other very deeply and fiercely, but we fought for pretty much my whole life. And she was fond of saying that as soon as I started talking back. And so we just had a really difficult relationship. My mom had probably some undiagnosed mental health struggles. She was a very, very fearful and controlling woman. Her fear was expressed through the way that she tried to control what all of us in the family were doing to minutia. And the older I got, the harder I fought to be the one that was in charge of decisions about how I lived my life and navigated the world. So our battles did not decrease as I grew older. They stayed at the same ferocity, unfortunately. So, we had a sort of a love-hate relationship, one of those kinds of things. I spent my life really wanting her to just approve of me and what I was doing with my life. And I felt like I fought really hard to try to get to that place. But in 2016, my wife and I purchased a farm up about an hour and a half north. We had been living about 20 minutes away from my parents. We were in Ann Arbor. They were still in Detroit in the home I grew up in. And we bought this farm and we're moving back up north to where Danny's family lives, my wife. And there was a carriage house that was part of the farm, a separate little carriage house. And when there was a series of events that led to some clarity that she was starting to experience some symptoms of dementia, but her mother had had Alzheimer's. So all of us assumed, including her, that we were dealing with Alzheimer's, early Alzheimer's. And that meant, as it had for my grandmother, a 20 plus year journey, because my mother was about the same age that my grandmother had been when she started showing signs. So we made a lot of assumptions about what we were dealing with. And when my dad asked us to step in and said, I can't do this alone. My mom had taken a fall. There was a few things that happened, and he got very emotional and said, I can't do this alone. I really need you to step in. You're the only one she'll respond to. I need help. We need to figure something out. Danny said, we've got that carriage house. And I said, yeah, over my dead body. Not going to happen. So I wouldn't say I answered the call willingly. It was a very reluctant call, but one where I felt like, who else is going to do it? My brother isn't going to step in. They're going to be an hour and a half away. Like, we should probably do this now while she's early enough in Alzheimer's that she can acclimate to a new area, and maybe it'll be a little less jarring later on as it progresses. We presented the idea to my parents, and my mother said, over my dead body. So we were probably a little more alike than I would like to admit. Thus why we clashed so hard. But eventually they did move in about 6 months later, and we went on this roller coaster from hell. And very quickly it became apparent that this was not the same path that my grandmother's disease had followed. But we attributed it to my mom's personality, because she was quite a force. And we attributed it to the fact that my grandparents had lived in Arizona, and we hadn't had quite this front row seat that we now had. to what was happening. So there were lots of excuses that we made about why this looked so different for her, when in reality, by the end of 2018, she was experiencing a lot of hallucinations, and they were getting more and more elaborate and troublesome. And she was losing a lot of weight. And she would also have days where Danny and I would walk back from their carriage house to our house, which was just across the driveway. And I would be very angry and frustrated at some interaction we'd just had. And Danny would say, I swear to God, she's faking it. I swear, there is nothing wrong with her. She's faking it. There were all of these days where she was completely lucid and herself. And so we just felt like we were on this roller coaster constantly. We saw a neurologist, and she was diagnosed with Lewy Body Dementia. And those are hallmarks of Lewy Body Dementia, the up and down versus linear decline, and also hallucinations. She was already aggressive. She was a yeller. So that part we didn't recognize as part of Lewy body, but that's another part. And it got also amplified as the disease progressed. So yeah, I wouldn't say, like I said, I answered the call very reluctantly, very answer to your question there.
Wow. There's so much just in.
Yes.
Go from there.
Well, one of the things that, while you were sharing, one of the things I wanted to ask, there's several things, but one about that, one being reluctant because of the relationship that you had. We had another guest, Kimberly, who was my mom's caregiver, and she had a similar story. You two really need to meet each other. I got to introduce you two. You guys can make movies together. But the same thing, she was sharing about, it was a very troublesome relationship from jump. And then all of a sudden the call comes, or the situation happens, and you make a choice. You mentioned about no, who else is going to do that, and that's that at that moment when you're just like, well, it's going to be me, and what was the transition, or did it ever transition, or was it back and forth? I can imagine, but when you made the decision of saying, okay, well, yes, let's go forward, and all that journey of oh man, but still all the time it's like, but no one else. It's got to be me, or it's going to be me. I'm choosing it's going to be me. It's not really. I'm not going to put this on anyone else. And was there any point, or you could share, that there was a regret of the decision, or I know you talk about that in your book, but we want
so many points where there was a regret of the decision. I talk a lot about, when I talk to caregivers and talk about the book, I talk a lot about this shame narrative that develops with caregivers. And if I think about it, the beginning, from the time when we all agreed, okay, we are going to do this, to actually getting them moved, settled, the house in Detroit sold and completely cleaned out, was like a 3-month process.
Wow.
And my mother absolutely insisted on being in the center of everything that was going on. That was not negotiable, and none of us could talk her out of it. And my father was unwilling to simply leave her there some days when they needed to go down to the house in Detroit. So I think this is when that shame narrative started, of all the anger and resentment that I felt for being put in this position, for being the one that my father came to and asked, for the way in which my brother was standing at the sideline with, every reason in the world about why he couldn't do this, but how he would be here to support me through the whole process, which in large measure he was at least an emotional support throughout it. He's one of the ones that spoke some hard truths to me sometimes that I needed to hear about taking care of myself and my family. But I mean, there were lots and lots of moments of regret because I was consumed with this narrative that said, this is what a caregiver is, and I am not that. They're supposed to be kind and compassionate and really nice and angelic with a visible halo around them. And I am like the fucking opposite in every single way, right? Pardon my French. But like, I mean, you couldn't create a more opposite portrait of what you're supposed to be. Not that I'm not a compassionate, kind person, but those aren't usually the first words that people list when they describe me, right? They appreciate me for other qualities that I possess. And so like not being those things was probably where it started. And then my inability to not act out of my anger and resentment in every interaction with my mother. And just wanting to shake her that she was repeating some of the same behavior that used to frustrate her to no end when my grandmother would do it. It's like, well, isn't this ironic? Right? But you couldn't point that out to her. God help you. If you tried to point that out to her, it got real ugly. Charlotte got real mean and nasty. So just feeling like I wasn't all the things, I wasn't up to this. I wasn't patient enough by any stretch of the description. How the hell was I going to manage this? My kids were 10 and 13 when my parents moved in across the driveway. So I was in the thick of raising a family with young adolescents, one of whom is, you know, the apple is still attached to this tree. It's so amazing how similar we are. So there was a lot of headbutting of our own kind in my house. All of that. I think that's where that shame narrative and second guessing and I'm not worthy, but who else is going to do it? I don't have a choice here really started for me.
Wow.
That's so powerful.
Wow.
That is so powerful. Yes. I definitely carried shame and rage for many years when my son was born. Because I was like, yeah, I know I'm the mom. And he's got another parent. So, yeah, I can definitely relate.
And that shame that like we're not supposed to feel that way. So you definitely are not supposed to talk about it.
Right.
Because that's the thing that's really struck me in all of this is my own reluctance to telling my story of like how I really felt about everything that was happening, which I would regularly tell to the friends and family who would listen while we were going through it. But after a while, you feel like you're not supposed to talk about it with them either, because you start to feel like a broken record, right? But I have been struck by my own deep reluctance as a truth teller professionally, somebody that walks through the world doing that. And it's what people hire me for, is to be painfully honest with them about things. So it's very aligned with who I am. I was second guessing whether or not I should be really honest about it. I was terrified on the eve of releasing this book. I probably didn't sleep for 2 weeks.
Wow.
I was eating myself alive with anxiety about being judged, about people telling me I was a bad person, that I had been verbally abusive, you name it. I was filled with fear around releasing this book. And yet I cannot count the number of people who have come to me and said, Thank you.
Yeah.
Somebody is finally speaking really honestly about how much this can suck. And it's not something we asked for. And we are not martyrs. Please stop putting that mantle onto us. We are three-dimensional people who have the full range of emotions, and that is okay. We are allowed. And yet we don't feel like we are in the midst of it. And how sad is that? That's what we need to change.
Yeah. I had to definitely learn that it was okay to not be okay. Yeah.
That's good. Yeah, I know you can.
Man, she is talking my language on every level.
I can't wait for you all to.
Yeah.
Well, there's so much where I sit back and listen, and that's why I was so intrigued with your story, course, for me, not of course, but for me, it was a different dynamic with me and my brother. It was a different dynamic with my mom, and how just our whole life, it's a whole different lifestyle. And I hear stories like yours, stories like Christy's, stories like Kimberly's, and I'm like, wow, I can relate and understand, but I'm like, wow, how, because there's emotional dynamics, there's relational differences, there's culture differences, there's all kinds, so many different, but we're still all caregivers. And but you're right, there's a part of, yeah, I would do something for my mom because, mom was Mighty Mouse to us, and and
she was a really good, caregivee. Like, I used to tell him all the time, like, you have no idea how blessed you are. That she doesn't swim in noncompliance. Like, she's just was so sweet and angelical, really, when Ellen used the word, but I was like, if only my child would wear those underpants when they woke up that day, I would have loved to have swam in just a little bit of that.
wow.
Yeah.
Well, and there's also the dynamic of how culture and society grooms women versus how it grooms men.
That's true.
Yeah.
Right.
And there's a definite dynamic difference there, not just the mother-daughter or the parent role, but the fact that society has very openly projects a whole crap ton of expectations onto women and the roles that we are supposed to have the capacity to play and want to play. And, we make jokes about it, but we have a really good friend of ours that's always making jokes until he realizes he's said it one too many times and I'm about to lash out. But he'll say, toes to the stove, toes to the stove. Like, there's this, this caricature of women and the roles that we're supposed to play and our ability to do things outside of that is also deeply unfair. And it just is part of the reality that also shapes very much this experience of caregiving that we have. So I just feel like I needed to highlight that part of it too. It's definitely at play.
Yeah, put it in there.
Yes.
Well,
yes.
Yeah, that dynamic. You mentioned about like your brother, and I'm not putting anyone on blast, but I couldn't do it as good as a job as you do. But like family members, the listening audience, is like there's times when family members, I love how you worded it, there may be reasons or excuses or whichever to say that, in other ways, I either I can't handle it, or I choose not to, or there's no way that I would do that, or whatever. There's different dynamics, and that also falls, I think, into place of making the decisions. Like, okay, well, no one else no one else is willing, or no one else is able, or it wouldn't be beneficial if someone else did it to anybody, to mom, to the family, or anyone, and it's just circumstance. But it is a point to bring out when there's times when it's like, well, wow, when there's expectations, and it's like, well, wait a minute now, would you like to volunteer, or for this, and that's a real dynamic as well that does happen when someone either criticizes or may say, well, why don't you do it this way, or you should feel this way, or don't you, don't you naturally want to take care of your mom, and they're not in your shoes at all. They don't even wear shoes. And that jumped out when you were talking about that too, like the family dynamic and the decision making and what you're feeling when you're going through.
Yeah. I'm really fortunate in that my brother never threw shade and tried to criticize how we were doing things. the thing that he would be quick to criticize was the way in which I was giving too much of myself. Right. So in that, I definitely want to, be clear that he was clear in his limitations to physically be involved in the caretaking. He probably promised a little bit more than his then girlfriend, now wife, wanted him to promise. And as their relationship progressed and as my mother's disease progressed, he became less available to help in some of the, come up and help out with projects and things like that around the house than he'd originally indicated a willingness to do. But he was always on the other end of the phone. And he was the first one to say, "What the hell is wrong with you? What do you mean you and Danny haven't been out on a date in however many months? Like, that stops right now. Pick 2 nights. Which 2 nights are mom and dad on their own? You pick 2 nights right now. You're not getting off the phone until you tell me which 2 nights are they going to be on their own. You do not need to be feeding them 7 days a week," because they were at our dinner table every single night.
Yeah.
And so, he was really, really good about being there for me, being a support for me through that. And was always there. And if he wasn't available when I called the first time, he would always text me and say, "I'm going to call you back at this time." And most of the time he did, especially in the earlier part. Again, as their relationship progressed, that got a little more complicated. But anyway, I am grateful because I meet people often who tell me that, their siblings are MIA or very critical, or saying, "I don't know what you're seeing. I don't see it," which is really common in the early stages when you're talking about any sort of dementia. So I do feel like we were lucky in that way in terms of the relationship with my brother. And then Danny's siblings were up there and her family was up there. And 2 of her siblings in particular were a big support to us through most of our caregiving journey with them. And they were great about including my parents when it came to they're one of those families that has weekly Sunday dinners with 30 people. Everybody comes, all the kids and everybody. And they were fantastic from the first moment of including my parents in that, and being very gracious about just understanding that she was being affected by a disease that made her say really weird shit sometimes, and not batting an eye about it, and helping us laugh about some of those moments that if you don't release, they will like drive you mad. So we did have some good support, and then we had a circle of very dear friends who are like family to us that absolutely carried us through the experience and were very much there for us until COVID hit, right? I mean, she passed away in December of 2020. So that last year was pretty hellacious, and it was pretty much just us at that point. And so, I mean, my brother was still around as he could be and safely as he could be, but the rest of our support system really fell away when COVID hit for a number of reasons. And so that last year was the hardest to navigate, with having to place her blind in a facility in May of 2020 when my father pretty much hit a nervous breakdown and reached his breaking point. And I had to scramble and find a place without being able to see any place. We were turned down by 3 different facilities because of her Lewy body diagnosis, which is common. People need to know that if they're dealing with Lewy body dementia. There are certain facilities that do not feel equipped to handle a patient because of the known aggression and hallucinations that can go along with that disease. And so we were turned down by a number of facilities, but finally found placement. And thankfully, it was a great small facility. The director there was an absolute angel and went well above and beyond to keep my mom there through some crazy situations when she probably should have been kicked out. She just really went above and beyond in all of the ways. And so that final 7 months of her life were as good as they could have been under any circumstances. But the support system in the early days was the only reason I think we managed to survive the first year or two.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, I know that. Share with the audience a little bit more about the Lewy body, about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
The type.
So since becoming certified to be a volunteer community educator, I've learned a lot about the different kinds of dementia. Alzheimer's dementia is the umbrella term, right? It's like soup. And then each of the different kinds are types of soup. So Alzheimer's is the most common, and it affects about 50% of all people with dementia. Lewy body is the second most common, and it affects between 25 and 35% of people that are diagnosed. So it is quite common, but it goes a lot faster than Alzheimer's does. And it seems like it's underdiagnosed because we hear people describing it all the time. And I'm like, I'm willing to bet anything that that's Lewy body, but they've just gotten diagnosed as having dementia. So people may recognize the name Lewy body because Bruce Willis has it. It often goes along with Parkinson's. Robin Williams had Lewy body. And in fact, unfortunately, Robin Williams is the reason that the medical community figured out you cannot give an antipsychotic mood stabilizer to someone who has suffered from clinical depression because it causes suicidal tendencies. And that is unfortunately what happened to Robin Williams. And so we were careful because my mother had suffered from depression. And so we paid very close attention to that as the disease progressed. But like I said before, one of the hallmarks is periods of lucidity. So it can seem like one day the person, especially in the early stages, one day they're perfectly fine. They make total sense. They are acting like they've always acted. There's no detectable difference. And then the next day they're caught in a hallucination where nothing is making sense. And they're seeing things that are not there. And they're envisioning these elaborate scenarios. And it can be very jarring. I remember one of the first time we really realized she was having a hallucination. We were all sitting at our dining room table, which looked out over these bay windows over this 22-acre beautiful farm that we had at the time. And we had horses in the pasture in one specific spot. But the rest of the land was not fenced off at that time. And we're sitting there at dinner, and she said, "Oh, look, the horses have found a new place to explore. I've never seen Danny jump out of a chair that fast in my life." She shot out of that chair. She's like, Where? What do you see? What do you see?" And we looked, and the horses were exactly where they always are. But my mother's like, "They're over there. Look, one of them just jumped over the fence." Danny was out the door and down the stairs before I could say another word. And we all panicked because Danny grew up chasing horses that escaped from fences that were not well kept. And she was very vigilant about keeping our fences up. So she went out, and we just sort of realized somewhere in the midst of that when she came back in, and she's like, "The horses are fine. Nobody is out." I did a head count because we had 7 of them. Actually, I think we had 9 of them at that time. And we sort of asked a few questions, and she acted as if nothing had happened a few minutes later. And she was like, "Well, they were exploring over there yesterday. I don't know what you're getting all excited about." Okay. So like things like that was how it started. By the end, it escalated to, there's a specific syndrome, I think it's called Capgins or Capman's syndrome that is associated with Lewy body, where you see like doppelgangers of people. So my father became a doppelganger of himself. So one minute he was Ron, her husband of more than 50 years that she'd known and loved since she was 16. Wow. And the next minute he was a doppelganger of himself named Dave, who was a sheriff coming to arrest her, or someone trying to sexually assault her, or someone trying to sell her something or attack her. Like there was a myriad of ways that Dave showed up, which ironically is my brother's name. So that was a bit weird. But like she felt very, very threatened by him at lots of times. And I just would send him out of the room in the beginning, I was like, Dad, just walk away for a second. And then he'd come back a few minutes later, and all of a sudden it's like, Ron, where did you go? This man was here doing these weird things or trying to arrest me or whatever. And it's like, holy hell, like you just feel like you're starting to lose your mind because she was for her, those things were absolutely real. And she was seeing them as if they were actually happening. And so the hallucinations are a big hallmark of Lewy body. But also they say that the life expectancy once you've been diagnosed tends to be 5 to 8 years beyond diagnosis. My mother's, she first started showing signs in 2016 of having some kind of dementia, and she passed away at the end of 2020. It was like 4.5 years, start to finish, the entire thing. She passed away 2 years after her diagnosis. Wow. So I think that's because the gift and the curse of the disease is that lucidity. And we know that she was having moments of lucidity right up till the end. And I think she gave up. I think she decided she was done. Yeah. She didn't want to live that way. And she was living her absolute worst nightmare. And I think she gave up. And that's why she died so soon. That, and she did have a wasting disease. And she was, she stood 5'10", and by the very end, she was down to like 120 pounds. So she was wasting away literally. So it's like the unwanted stepchild, I say, form of dementia. It's just a horrendous. I mean, none of them are great, but it's a really particularly cruel form of the disease, and I think.
Yeah. Wow. Heart goes out.
Thank you.
Wow. You have insight questions?
No, I am just so fascinated by this. And I love that you got so educated on it and that you're continuing to heal by helping other families, because that's in the same space that I'm at, that it continues to heal as we continue to share our story and help others not have to have a minute part of what we've had to face. Because it is very taxing. And I worked in an Alzheimer's home as one of my first jobs in the medical field, and it can be very scary for them. So I'm glad that you were able to find a very safe place for your mom, because I do know that is very hard. And I just so happen to have worked in one of those angelical facilities where it was, probably 7 or 8 people to that facility. But they were treated like gold. And we had a nurse that educated us on how to make sure to, treat them and understand them, and how to separate them to keep them, the others safe and those kinds of things. So yeah, I was thinking a lot about a lot of my old patients that I miss. So thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I feel like if I could leave people with something, and what I'm trying to do by telling this story and by talking about it is partly because it's been a really important part of my own healing journey, honestly. Yeah. We're approaching the 4th anniversary of her death, and I can talk about it for the most part without falling apart. Whereas in the beginning, first couple of years after she passed away, it was still all so very raw for me and unprocessed. And writing the book was for me an incredibly important way for me to process the experience. But I do talk a lot about assumptions, and I think a lot about assumptions because they're so very woven into the fabric of how we communicate, just generally. And there are so many assumptions about caregiving, about caregivers, about what the journey is like, and about what we are allowed to feel or think or say or do, what we deserve in terms of having to earn rest or earn some kind of self-care, that self-care has to be complicated when really it's not. It's anything you can do to reset your nervous system. Right. That is self-care.
Yes.
Yeah. Getting out of fight or flight.
Yeah. Yeah. And you don't have to be on a massage table. I mean, it's nice if you can be on a massage table, but you don't have to be in order to take care of yourself. And so anything I can do to encourage the conversation, continue the conversation, and give caregivers just a little bit of permission if they need it, because I know I sure did, to just feel whatever they're feeling and not beat the crap out of themselves for feeling that way. And that's how I want to contribute to the conversation, honestly.
No, that is great advice. And I mean, and just understanding like they're doing that on top of everyday life. Like it's a dual job. So giving themselves the grace, like you say, to not be okay. You're doing twice the work. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Maybe if you just share a couple of things that, like, now, just in what you were saying that that you would have done or you discovered to do to give yourself self-care, like, a couple of things that you can advise to give the audience. Like, you don't have to have a spa gift card.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's actually a whole list of little, sort of simple tips that I put into the book. It really is anything that resets your nervous system, and that's different for different people. So for me, sometimes it was, there was this one particular pasture I would sprint as fast as I could, and I would run around that pasture when I was feeling really angry and like I was going to come out of my skin. I needed to do something that could help me get that energy out of my body. So I would sprint around the pasture. Sometimes I would get into my car and drive, and I would scream. I just would literally scream. I just did that the other day, actually, with a particularly stressful situation. Just scream. Just let yourself be so lit on fire furious that you have to scream bloody murder to get it out of your system. Just make sure you're doing it not within earshot of someone who will be terrorized by that and potentially call 911. That would be bad.
Yes.
But putting yourself in, scream into a pillow, whatever. But other things like box breathing, super simple. 4 counts in, hold it for 4 counts at the top, 4 counts out, and hold it for 4 counts at the bottom. Box breathing, it takes 90 seconds to reset your nervous system if you do some good box breathing. And that really does work some miracles in terms of your brain getting the kinds of oxygen and chemicals that it needs to be able to think clearly again. And like you said, get out of that fight, flight, or freeze mode.
Yeah.
But I mean, just giving yourself permission to take a walk alone, or drive to the grocery store alone, or go out to dinner with your loved one alone. And I think the biggest work that we have to do as caregivers, honestly, is the mental work of not beating ourselves up for being 3-dimensional people with a full range of functioning emotions. As crazy as that sounds, or ironic or simple as that might sound, I just find over and over again, that is the number one barrier that I experienced and that other people tell me they experience, is just the permission to be a full that has a lot of messy emotions about this. And being worried that people are going to judge you for it.
Right.
Find a different support group if they are, because shouldn't be, and those support groups can be amazing outlets. So that's what I would talk, and just ask for what you need. Just ask. Learning to ask for what you need. Someone asked me this question the other day. What do you say when people are like, let me know if I can help, or let me know how I can help? Like, you feel so overwhelmed, you're paralyzed when you hear that question.
Right.
So I learned this actually when my second child was born, because I had a very rambunctious toddler and a newborn, and I'd had a C-section. And I was in this mom's club with these wonderful women who just, of their own accord, made a meal train for me. They just started dropping off food, and they were like, you don't want it right now? That's fine. Put it in the freezer. It'll freeze just as it is. Another friend brought over groceries. Someone else said, I'm at Costco. Send me your list. Someone else came and picked up all of our laundry and returned it a few hours later, folded and clean. So it's going to look different for everybody,
Right.
depending on who you are and depending on what kind of caregiving you're doing and what stage of life you're in. But if you can find a moment to sit down and think about what are 5 things that if somebody would just take care of this for me, it would really make my day or make me feel so much lighter. Make your list. And then when somebody says, what can I do to help? They say it out of a well-intentioned place. Say, well, I actually have thought about it, and if you
Right.
could do this, that would be great. And if you can't, it's fine. But if you're looking, like, here's my list. I had one person say, I'm going to do that and post it on my social media. And then, my friends who are constantly asking me, I can refer them to my pinned post.
Yeah.
Great.
That is really great. Yes.
We got to get better about asking for, like, really saying what it is that we need and not contributing to this martyr image and narrative that we've got to just be able to do it all alone, because that's silly. Nobody does it alone.
That's right.
Yeah.
That is such a great idea. I just got this vision of postings that we can do, like, hey, have you made your list of when people ask, what can I do for you? Well, make your list of 5. Here's 50 suggestions.
I'm going to do it now, and I'm not taking care of anybody but myself right now. I'm still going to do it. Yes, there is 5 things I could have you do for me. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, one of the women actually 2 different women in this, like, senior community group that my parents had joined when they moved up there. 2 of them offered to come and just sit with my mom for a couple of hours and do a puzzle with her, so my dad could leave the house and get a little bit of a break. It doesn't have to be complicated.
No,
it's
it
those simple,
doesn't.
everyday little things that just really support us.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's so good.
That is so good. Yeah. For me, it was fun. I'm like, what do you mean, go have fun?
Yeah.
Are you nuts? Do you know what I'm dealing with? And it wasn't until my son himself said, Mom, I've never seen you having fun. I'd really like to know when I'm gone that you're going to be okay. I was like, oh, okay. And just again, like you said, the stories we tell ourselves. I'm like, why am I going to go on vacation when my child's on hospice? All kinds of people are going to judge me around that. And just the fear of, are you going to be there when I get back? All those things. But it was so important to him that he see me happy. And so forcing myself to have fun was definitely not easy. And then I enjoyed myself and took pictures and, got to send them to him and videos and things like that. But that was his wish. And that was probably one of the hardest things I had to do, but I did it. I did it. Like you said, very reluctantly, but I did it. Yeah.
Wow. This is so good.
Absolutely.
Good stuff. Did you have any other questions for?
No, I mean, I've already got 3 things on my list already. I'm like, who's picking up my prescriptions? Who's delivering my groceries? I love it. No, I have enjoyed every minute of this conversation.
Thank you so much. It's been so delightful to be with you both. I appreciate the opportunity.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this will be the first of many. We're definitely going to have you back on. Want everybody to know, you can see in the notes to contact Ellen. You want to get her book. You want to get her audio book. She even has a free chapter that you can listen to. And
Yes.
how it began. And that alone would be like, wait, what?
Yeah, that was really powerful.
And you've already heard and experienced her passion, her vocabulary, her delivery. I love it.
Nope.
Sorry about
That's the best. That's the precise, raw version of how it really is. Yes.
Like, hey, no, but and I was speaking to the eloquence. I don't want to. I was speaking to, like, you use some words in there that I'm gonna have to, like, ooh, that's a dictionary. I haven't heard that.
Oh.
That's what I meant by vocabulary.
I resonated with the rageaholic. I was there. I was resonating very well with that. I was like, she's my girl.
It's all
She got it. She was right there in the thick of it with me.
Yeah.
Oh no, so no, just really, really, really good, and we definitely will have you back again. Everybody, please go ahead and check out. We have Ellen's not only her book, but also her website and everything on our resource page, and also in the show notes. When we do our next episode, we'll probably be highlighting something else that.
You know what I would love to hear from her, because I had my own experience with my teenagers. As you mentioned, your kids were young, and having them be at prime teenage age when all this was unfolding, right as, COVID was also here with us. So I know the experience I had without a pandemic. I can only imagine what you had to face. And teenagers are going to teenage. And that's two whole balls of heavy time in your life being simultaneously dealt with at the same time. So I would love to hear that.
Yeah, so
Absolutely.
right. Yep, we got the title for the next episode.
Absolutely.
No,
Being
that
stuck
is
in the sandwich generation.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because my mom, and she had stroke-induced dementia, very, very beginning and very early and mild startup with it. But at the same time, my son was 16. He just finished 10th grade, having to move into grandma's house, and his bathroom was shared with grandma. So stuff's in the toilet still. And he's like, why do I have it? So no, that would be really, really good to share about that. Yeah, we need almost maybe a series about that. With the kids that they become caregivers as well.
They do.
Because it just comes with the
comes with the territory. They're
yeah.
part of the package. So
and they're affected in different ways too.
Yeah.
So that's good to see.
I would love that. Yeah, that would be a great conversation.
Yeah,
even now hearing stories from my kids, I'm like, man, we went through it, didn't we?
Yeah. Well, I love, Ellen, how you shared about writing your wonderful, wonderful book, powerful book, and how you shared that it took 2 years to even get to releasing. And I mean, one, to write a book is major, but two, to write a book about that experience is amplified. And we were sharing, we started this podcast back up after her son passed, my mom passed, and we're in this place now of, we call it post assignment. We're in this place where we're able to speak to caregivers, whether before you become, during the journey, and then what now, who are we now? What do I need? How can I give back? How can I help those that are coming along? And I forgot whatever the episode, but we were talking about, and it's like, it takes almost a year or two to. Yeah.
I heard the second year was harder than the first, and I was just starting my second year, and I was like, really? Because this last year wasn't easy. But it actually was true emotion-wise, because you're just coming out of the fight or flight. I spent my whole first year just decompressing from trauma, PTSD, like you name it. I also, worked in the hospital, and was going through COVID at this whole time that my son passed. So there was a lot of things impacting me, and I just literally laid on my bed and, had to decompress and get out of fight or flight mode and learn about all my triggers and why, and how do I shift out of that, and just really downloading. And like you said, talk about screaming. Oh, that was one of my go-tos of all time, is one of another parent from the Ronald McDonald House. We frequented those often. So thank you, Ronald McDonald's. And they shared that with me. They said, just get in your car, because, you're in the hospital parking lot, roll up the windows, turn on your music loud, and scream. And, because like you said, you don't want people to think you're being, attacked or anything like that. But, or even just, anywhere that you can be, that you can. For me, it was usually the car, because I couldn't do that in the house, or the kids would be like, "What's wrong with you? You're acting up again." You know? There goes mom. She's screaming again. But no, that was one of my big releases, because I was constantly dealing with, end of life with him. So he would always bounce back, and I'd be like, here we go. We get to start all over with these emotions. And it was so frustrating. So it definitely became a go-to. So I'm so thankful that you mentioned that, because that is one of my top things that I say when they're like, how do you deal with it? I'm like, I scream. I screamed a lot. And I did a lot of rageful things the first 10 years till I tried to figure out how, like, okay, he's still alive. Dang it. And, how do we function forward? So no, there's a lot to unpack when you're grieving.
For sure. And, when I think about the first 2 years after she passed away, we went from one shitstorm to another. As you said, you're still living your life while you're caregiving. You still have all of these other responsibilities and all of these facets of life that you have to navigate. And we had a little bit of challenge and turmoil. We had a kid in crisis who ended up moving out of state. We had a breakdown in communication and disagreement with a family so devastating that we didn't feel we could stay. We didn't feel safe in the area where we were at that time. It just was an ugly, ugly time. And we ended up having to sell our farm and leave the area. And I think after my mom passed away, I picked up and just fire fought on all of the other fronts that we had with us, and didn't even give myself space to really process and grieve and try to figure it out. I also was releasing another book. My first book came out in 2022. And once that one was done, that's when I got to the point where I said, okay, I need to just find a way to process this, because I took myself away for a week thinking, well, maybe I just need a good cry, because I haven't really done a lot of it. Maybe I just really need a good cry. So I took this box of things that my mother had saved from my childhood that I had not gone through. And I rented an Airbnb, and I took myself there, and I spent the week going through the box and crying my eyes out and grieving, but I still I didn't feel like I'd really processed very much as a part of that. I just let myself be raw and grieve. But when I came back, the second book was out in the world, the first book was out in the world. That project was done. And my publisher, on a rotating basis, hosts these writing groups for just a small handful of people. And it's a 6-month intensive program to help be part of a community while you're trying to write a story. And I thought, I'm going to join that group. I'm probably never going to publish it. It's probably going to be a total piece of crap. Certainly is not something my clients are going to read, right? It's not about communication or assumptions or any of the work I do as an executive coach. It's about my grief. And the story that came out of me, everybody in the group, as I was writing it, was like, oh no, you have to publish this, because none of them were caregiving, but they were all like, I can relate to this in so many different ways. I can relate to it on different levels. And by the way, thank you for the preview, because now I'm going into it with my eyes more open and a little bit less of an asshole to other people I know who are caregiving. So appreciate that. You got to publish it. But like I said, for the 2 weeks leading up to publishing it, I was petrified of the judgment that I was sure was going to come my way and all this other stuff. So I think for some of us, we lay down on the bed and we just let it consume us. For others of us, we don't feel like we can. We feel like we've got too many other things happening that are important and on fire and immediate that have to be addressed. And I had my dad. I wasn't sure he was going to survive the first year and a half after she passed away. He did. He's still with us. He's 83 and feisty and living his best life.
Right.
I love him. He's doing great. But but we weren't sure. We weren't sure he was going to beat those odds. He was a very sick man the first year and a half after. I can't count the number of times he was in and out of the hospital. Wow. And so between my older son in crisis, between a younger one that we were like, oh my God, are you okay? And just everything that was going on, I didn't feel like I could slow down enough to breathe, let alone grieve. Right. So I think people handle it, because life is happening. So we handle it in different ways, and there's no wrong way to do it. But you're absolutely right that whole post process is a totally different beast.
It is. It really is. It really is.
Wow. And it literally is a new beginning, and all things are new in it because nothing is ever the same after.
No.
So it's like brand new, and you're learning as you're going. Now, you're learning with a lot more knowledge and experience, but it's still new. And yeah, it's good stuff. Wow, Ellen, this is wonderful. Thank you.
So wonderful.
Been a delight.
Thank you.
Absolute delight.
Awesome. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is another fantastic episode. Thank you for joining us. Please visit Ellen. What, is this my second out? Is this what you?
I'm like, he doesn't want to leave the.
Sorry, I probably restarted the conversation.
Like he could talk for another 3 hours with her.
Good stuff. We will regret. What was our word? Not regrettably, reluctantly. We're going to reluctantly end this episode. Looking forward to our next one. But, all right, Ellen, thank you so much, and we will be in touch. And we are listening forward to finishing your book and sharing it. All on our resource page. You can get Ellen's book from there. You can also contact Ellen from all of the links and things that we have for her, as we highlighted her on our resource page. And thank you so much, Ellen.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. We appreciate you. All right. Till next time, I'm going to officially end before I start with another question. All right. Take care. God bless everybody.
See you soon. Bye-bye. Yeah.
Your stories, your services, your resources, anything that you have, we want. The main thing is to share this with other caregivers or those that have already finished their assignment of caregiving. We just constantly want to share our stories.
Yeah, come share your stories. We'd love to hear them.